When God calls you out of your comfort zone, say yes. If you want what God has for you, you need to be uncomfortable. It's not the time to run the other way and avoid it. If you are in a spot right now where you are just tired of how everything is, that is a sign. If you're in a spot where it just gets hard waking up, it's a sign. If you are in a spot right now where you're doing one thing, but something else just keeps on calling out to you, no matter what you are doing, that's a sign to get into your uncomfortable season. It is time to be obedient. You may be in a place right now where things just seem uncertain and your days may not go the way you want it to. You're feeling depressed. You're staying awake at night and you keep on recalculating how the heck you're gonna get out that certain situation that you are in right now. The outcomes are not looking so great and you're asking God, why the heck am I still here? Because what I'm seeing around me is not looking like what I imagined. We're going to talk about how to navigate through your discomfort so you can step into your purpose. So you need to pause this video right now, pull out a pen and paper and start writing some notes. If you want what God has for you, you need to step outside of your comfort zone. That's a non-negotiable. And don't get me wrong, the good seasons are awesome, especially when you're just coasting by, everything's working out, everything's booming. You're walking with your head up high because you're like, yes, this is the life I want to live. You're patting yourself on your back and you're looking good. But unfortunately, you don't grow in those moments because you already reap the benefits. There was something that you figured out before then to get to that certain point. And now you're ready for the next level. It's so easy when everything is just working out because it doesn't require extra brain power, energy, or emotions. And why would you want to waste energy when everything is working out? That's just how we are naturally. If everything's working, it doesn't require extra manpower. It doesn't require me to be extra creative or put any type of extra effort. That is not necessary. You grow when things look like a mess. You're wondering if you're going to win the race. You grow when you're in a position where you need to figure it out. You grow when you decide to do the very thing you've been trying to avoid for weeks or maybe months. And you decide to finally make that change and make that shift. Challenges will force you to think through your challenges. So what I'm about to share with you is a thought that I probably got early last year. Maybe you should get a job and then work on your YouTube stuff on the side. At the time, I was running a marketing agency and there definitely was challenges like any other business. I got into a point where I just knew that this was not something that I was going to do for the next 20 years. I knew it was something that turned into short term. I didn't have the same vision that I did in the beginning that I did now. It completely changed and transformed. But I have to admit, when I got that thought, I was like, that must not be from God. Maybe that's just a random thought that I was thinking. And it was only later on where something shifted and one day God just told me, okay, it's time to let go of the rest of clients that you have now. And it was a very clear, loud voice because I was in complete silence. And don't get me wrong, I was very scared, but I was like, okay, God, what am I gonna do then? But I still did it. I had complete peace when I did it. I had no regrets once I let go of that client. I continued to use my savings and all that stuff, and then once I got to a point where my savings were depleted, now I was like, okay, what now, God? And then I got back that same thought of doing that strategy of doing the job and then working on this business, which is the YouTube channel. And I finally gave in. When you are put in a situation where you need to get creative, all of a sudden, every objection you had is not a thing anymore. And all of a sudden, the ideas that you got maybe months ago or a year ago is going to look good. And all of a sudden, it's going to make sense. And I'm going to explain that to you later, what I mean. I believe God will put you in a situation like that because that's where He wants you to be. When things are working the way we wanted, we'll tend to not be as responsive to new ideas because we'll be like, well, this is working and I don't want to do that. Your ego gets in the way or your pride gets in the way. And if you're failing and you're messing up while being uncomfortable, that is a precious, beautiful, uncomfortable moment. Why? Because when you're failing, you're learning and you're figuring it out. When you're not trying to do anything and you're just going through the motions, you're not figuring out anything. You're just doing what you know to do, and you just keep on doing the same thing over and over that's maybe driving you crazy, and you're beginning to dread. But you're like, I know this already, because that's what was happening with me. Listen, I knew I had the skills to get clients, but it came to a point where I was just becoming complacent. I knew it was a journey that I needed to close, but I just didn't know how. You're occupied, right? You're in that go, 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 go mode. But as you know, when God wants you to walk into something better, more than we think that we need, because we will settle for comfortable. If everything is going good or if everything is mediocre, we will usually be okay with it. But when God wants you to walk into something better, his goal is not for you to be comfortable. His goal is not for you to become complacent and just stuck doing the same thing over and over. That's not getting you to where he needs you to get to. His goal is for you to do what's necessary, aka what's uncomfortable, so you can walk into the things that God has for you. As soon as I gave into the plan that God told me last year, I instantly got a flashback, and I remembered that voice, and I was like, that was God. And I remember telling a friend, do you know that God had told me months ago to do this? I already knew that I need to do this. I just didn't do it. Now there's days in the present time where I'm like, man, why didn't I do this sooner? Because here's the thing. I was doing a business that was keeping me distracted. It was holding me back. It had me burned out. I was starting to dread it. And therefore, I was not at my 100% capacity to do what God wants me to do. Now I have less stress, and I have more freedom to be creative and more freedom to grow and walk into the things that God has for me. And I have to admit, it's not perfect, but it complements what I'm trying to accomplish right now. I came a long way, because when I first got the idea, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that again. But now that I'm in it, I'm so grateful that I'm in this path, because I'm starting to see things unfold. It's causing me to dream more, where before I didn't dream as much. And it's okay that while you're building and while you're trying to accomplish what you need to accomplish, it's not perfect. It's okay if you mess up. Leave room for yourselves to fail. Leave room for you to not like certain things. And leave room for you to like certain things, to learn what you like and what you don't like. Everything does not have to be perfect in order for you to be obedient to what God is calling you to do. You do what you know to do, and that's all you need to worry about. You have to remember, it's never forever. You may be uncomfortable in a season, and then there comes a season where you become comfortable again. And guess what? Then you have to restart the cycle all over again. Fun, right? But here's what I learned. Nothing good comes when you're complacent and you're trying to be like everyone else. Just because you can make money from it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. And I'm going to say it again. Just because you can make money from it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. So when I had started the agency, and I'm going to get back into the story now, I started that business because I was working for that CEO in his successful agency, and he ended up letting me go. And I had this bold thought, you know what, let me ask him to help me build a business that was as successful as his. And so he ended up mentoring me. I was very grateful, and I learned a lot from him over the course of the next 2 years. But over time, I got tired of it, and I got a revelation, and the voice was clear, and it said, that was his purpose, not yours. I spent years trying to be like everyone else and not embrace who I was. So therefore, when I started my business journey, yes, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot of new skills, and I started to discover my strengths. But those insecurities still transferred over into my new business ventures. Therefore, I spent many years doing businesses that I knew that I was going to do forever just for the money. And I would not do what I knew I needed to do. But because I was making money, that's how I justified it. I was not walking the path that God had for me. Yes, I would make money, I would get clients from it, but I would go through spurts where it would go like this because eventually it's like I had no more passion for it. You can only operate being something else for so long until eventually your mind's just like, I just want to be myself. I just want to be who God called me to do. And that's it. I don't want to be like anyone else. And that's how you have to think about it. You will do your best. You would be your best self if you just stop looking at what other people are doing, how successful they are, and just looked at yourself and said, what do I want to do? What makes me happy? What do I need to do that's uncomfortable right now? So that way there'll come a time where I'll just be comfortable. Eventually, what was happening, I would always jump in these businesses because I knew I had a strength in it. It was very predictable. I was able to predict, you know, to a certain extent, like how well I would do. I was able to predict people's responses. I was able to predict what will happen in the business. But the one thing I couldn't predict was doing this stuff right here. Motivating women, not knowing exactly what the steps are. I didn't have someone else to exactly tell me the exact steps, the mentors. In every business venture I had, I always had someone that told me step by step. But here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with having business coaches. I'm a big believer in having coaches, but you have to leave room for your own intuition. You have to leave room for God's voice. You have to leave room for the path that He's setting for you. You can't just be using logic and following everything that someone has for you. You can't just use logic because you'll miss out on what God has for you. I'm a very analytical person, so this makes sense for me, and maybe you guys can relate. In the spiritual world, that's just not how it works. You don't have to know every step. There comes a point where it just requires you to trust God. And it may be hard, but it's gonna be where you're the happiest, because you know why? You're being yourself. You're doing exactly what God created you to be. I don't need to know all the steps. I don't need to know all 42 steps. As much as I would love to know all 42 steps, that would benefit me so much. But I'm realizing it's okay to be in the unknown. It's not something that you're used to doing, and it's something that is a completely new space for you, and it's something that it's unknown. I strongly believe that I was avoiding for many years to motivate. Like, I did it to some extent. Like, it would always come out in every business that I did. Very funny, right? But I think there was a extent where I was avoiding it because it was the unknown. It was not something that I was used to doing. I was used to doing very predictable businesses. And it was the one thing where I just couldn't predict, and I could only trust God. And what I'm doing right now is all connection. It's all about connecting, and it's something that grows naturally and it forms over time. Sometimes it's okay to just believe in what you're doing and not know the rest. You don't need to know everything. It's okay to be walking like this and just doing what you know to do. And just because you don't know what's going to happen or what's next is not a sign for you to stop. It does not mean, let me go back to the old thing that I'm comfortable with. No. When you are in that state, you need to push through in the uncomfort, because it's gonna feel uncomfortable for a while, but eventually you're gonna get used to that feeling, because it's gonna ignite you. When you're doing something uncomfortable and you grow a passion for it, it's such beauty in that, especially if you enjoy it. Instill it in your mind that it's okay to feel discomfort. It's okay to feel tired at times, especially if you have a job and then you're trying to make change. The only way to find change is to feel discomfort, to feel like that's outside of what I'm used to doing. So many people tend to get uncomfortable and then they think it's not normal. So then they automatically take that as a sign to stop, because they're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel like what I've been doing for the last few years. Duh. Obviously, if you've been doing the same thing over and over for a few years now, there's gonna be a part of you that's comfortable. There's gonna be a part of you that's like, you know what, I'd rather just stay doing that same thing. But because of how God made you, there's gonna be that other part of you that's like, man, I know I need to make change, and I know it's gonna be hard. How many times have you tried to make a change? So whether that's changing your eating habits or trying to do more something, so exercising, and then it's uncomfortable at first, but then once you get into it and you remember how you feel, then all of a sudden it gets addictive. You know how many times Because I do pickleball every week. And in the beginning, it's very fun, but you're not hitting the ball as much. The ball is hitting the ceiling or it's going out of the court. And do you know how many times where I will feel like, oh, maybe I should cancel it or not go? But because I'm building this routine, there's something inside of me that even when that thought comes, I go anyways because I know I'm gonna have fun. And every time I do, it's like a nice little release. We all have this in us where we'd rather do nothing. If we had a chance, we'd rather watch Netflix, just lay there, not interact with people, and just be in our own comfort zone. Your home is your comfort zone. If you never took a risk and decide to be uncomfortable, you'll not meet new people. You'll never discover or enjoy the things that you love doing right now if you decide to always be comfortable. When you're uncomfortable, it's an opportunity for you to try something new. It's an opportunity to discover something. It's an opportunity to learn more about yourself. But they are such crucial moments because usually it's a beautiful pivot. It's an opportunity for a beautiful pivot beyond what you imagined, what you didn't think that could be possible. And I understand that sometimes it can feel counterproductive because you maybe work your job or in this completely different scenario, and in your mind you're like, I'm tired and I know I need to make the change, but I'm just tired and I don't have the capacity to make that change. And sometimes it's hard to push yourself because you're like, God, if I could just remove that job or remove that distraction or remove that responsibility, I would have all the time in the world to do it. But the reality is we all have bills to pay. You get stuck in this revolving circle of, and I know I did. Well, if you don't make the change, you're gonna stay in the place you are, especially if you don't like it. And if you do make the change, there's obviously benefits because you'll be able to see a beautiful pivot and you'll be able to make change and you'll be able to hopefully do the thing that you enjoy doing more. And then it becomes a point where you're like, okay, so do I want to be unhappy or do I want to be happy and fulfilled? And it gets to a point where you have to ask yourself, how much am I willing to sacrifice? Am I willing to be obedient? It's something that people struggle with every day and I believe that's why a lot of people don't make the changes because it doesn't feel good, especially at first. And you have to disrupt your whole life. But what I always tell myself is distractions are always going to come. The bills are always going to be there. So it comes a point where you just have to do what you got to do. Also, you're going to be stuck doing the thing that you don't want to do. And one of my biggest fears was whenever I would be making a change and a pivot while doing what I needed to do was, am I going to break? Am I gonna break while trying to do a pivot? Especially if my plate is so full. Am I gonna have a whole breakdown one day and can't handle it? Not knowing what the end result is going to be. That's a lie of the enemy. The enemy will tell you you can't handle it because he knows the impact that you are going to have. The truth is you'll be able to handle the change and the pivot as long as you lean on Jesus. You can't do it on your own. Change is something that's hard already, and so you need to lean on something. If you're leaning on Jesus, there may have times where you're like, God, I'm overwhelmed. What matters is you get to a point where you're just depending on His strength, and you're making this discovery that you don't have to make it happen. Your only responsibility is to have faith and do what you know you got to do that's in your control, and leave the rest for God to make happen. You don't have to take on the stress of making your vision happen and come to life. Isn't that so rewarding to know? But the one thing you can't do, and you have to promise me, is not take all the burden on yourself and then get stuck in your mind and never take action. Don't do that to yourself. If something's tugging on your heart and it's uncomfortable, do it. Even if it's small steps. It's so rewarding to just be obedient. You're gonna feel way better. You're gonna feel way more free doing what God calls you to do. Don't avoid not doing something because it's uncomfortable. Do the thing. Pivots are beautiful. I want to share real stories from the community. And so if you have something on your heart that you want to share, whether that's a story, a learning moment, a aha moment, a moment where you learn from, this will be all anonymous, of course. Please fill out the form. I want to start doing more videos, just reading out people's stories so you can know that you're not alone. And so we can all learn from it. So click the link in the description.